I guess we're going to have to let people know that if your chin hits the table or you pull a muscle laughing, we are not responsible for that at all. You are listening
Nobody.
to this podcast at your own risk.
You have arrived at LabX, the podcast for the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor. We are so excited you're here. Hey, Jim Bob, I'm so excited. We have Chris Duffy today on our podcast. Do you know who he is?
Oh man, I just saw his TED talk. Unbelievable. This guy who's a fifth grade teacher that went into comedy. Can you believe that?
Wow. And do you know, he is so funny and just eloquently spoken. He's got so much. He has shared so much information with us about not only the therapeutic side of humor, but he also talks about how to be a writer. And he talks about all the projects he's been working on and even a new book.
And it's not just about comedy. It talks
No.
about how to be a better person, talking about how to solve problems and then approach problems humorously so people can work towards a solution. This guy's got everything. Welcome to LaughBox, the official podcast of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. I'm Jim Bob Williams.
And I'm Katie B.
And today we have the former head of LinkedIn, Chris Duffy.
Hello. I should, so that I don't get sued, I should probably say it was only on LinkedIn as a joke. I do feel like with each step of that joke going broader and broader, I brought closer and closer to my financial ruin when they finally decide to sick a lawyer on me.
Oh no, that's not happening.
Well, it's not happening yet, but there's always tomorrow.
Okay. Everybody, right now you need to go out and listen to Chris's TED Talk on how to find laughter everywhere. And not only do you need to be as smart as a fifth grader, you need to be as spontaneous and open as a fifth grader to find humor. So,
I love that. Oh, that's a great way of putting it. That's exactly what I would agree 100%.
I'm doing
Katie,
a
you
dance.
can't see this, but Katie is dancing like a wild fifth grader. I've seen that many times in my classroom. Yeah, full fifth grade flailing arms dance.
Yes, I'm a pro.
I believe it. I believe it.
And the other thing that you do that's so amazing, Chris Duffy, is you have a podcast called How to Be a Better Human.
I do.
I think we are aligned there.
Yeah, I feel like it certainly is aligned with applied and therapeutic humor for sure.
And you have worked with John Oliver as an executive producer on Wyatt Cenac's Problem Areas.
That's right. Yeah, the comedian Wyatt Cenac, his HBO show. I wrote for both seasons of the show.
Amazing.
Wow.
We can't wait to hear about all of it. Oh my gosh.
how did you first get interested in the world of comedy and humor?
In some ways, I think I've always been interested in making people laugh, right? I have a really clear memory of being like, couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. And buying a joke book that was like 101 Shaggy Dog jokes. And they were so bad, genuinely so not funny that they kind of circle back to being funny again. I remember one of them was like, how do you make a Shaggy Dog float? And it was like 2 scoops of ice cream, some soda, and a very small Shaggy Dog. And you're like, that's barely a joke. It does this baffling. But I remember walking around with that book and trying it out on adults and being so charmed by the way that adults reacted to even the like attempts of humor. And then I think a lot of times people talk about wanting to be the funny person, but for me, an equal driver in getting into the world of comedy and humor was really always loving being around funny people. In elementary school, in middle school, in high school, in my life as an adult, I always was trying to be friends with the funny people. I loved having friends who could make me laugh so hard that I would spit out my drink or cry or have my sides be aching with pain afterwards. That was always my number one criteria for friendship. And getting more and more into the world of comedy and humor, it just meant that I knew more and more people who were better and better at doing that. So that's been one of the huge joys and has continued to be one of the huge joys.
Your cheeks must hurt every day.
I have some of the strongest cheek muscles in all of North America. I don't know worldwide, but certainly in this continent, cheeks and only the internal side muscles in my abs. The external six pack is not there, but the internal holding your sides, those are extremely well practiced.
Okay, so you don't have to be the class clown, but it's a lot of fun to be class clown adjacent.
Certainly. Yeah. I was always like the teacher's pet. I always love I love approval, which is another thing you get from doing comedy, right? You get the approval of strangers. And so like the best way that you can get approval and have comedy is to sit next to the class clown, right? To be the one who hears the class clown's jokes, where that is absolutely the best position. And I remember one of the only times, in fact, I think the only time that I was ever sent to the principal's office was when I was in second grade and a kid whispered something funny to me. And then we both started laughing and I wouldn't snitch him out. I wouldn't say what he said. And so we both got sent to the principal's office.
You protected him. Aw.
In some ways, we both just got the same punishment we would have either way. But in my head, I was like, I am not going to betray you.
Yes, I will not perjure my friend who started this whole
Yes.
thing.
I am Spartacus. Similar thing.
Nice.
So when did humor and comedy go from being something that you just loved to being a vocation or being a career?
It's a great question. And, it's one that obviously a lot of people ask me about, especially like younger people or people trying to make a switch into doing comedy as a full-time job or becoming a TV writer or whatever. And I'll say that honestly, I never thought comedy could be a job. It just seems so impossible to make money on, right? It felt like the same kind of plan as I'm going to buy a lottery ticket and then I'll be a millionaire. So I guess technically that could happen, but it doesn't happen for many people. And like my dad worked for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It wasn't like I had some sort of like in where my dad could be like, why don't you meet my good friend, Steven Spielberg? It just was not, that was not in the cards. He was like, why don't you meet my good friend, the toll collector at the George Washington Bridge? And nothing against that person, but they're not getting you your foot in the door at HBO. I think that really what happened was, and this is the advice that I always give to people, is I was just doing it for fun. I was teaching fifth grade, and at night and on weekends, I was going and I was hanging out at the comedy theater and I was doing improv and I was doing stand up. And I was not in any way doing it because I was like, this is a career move. What is the number one way that I can build my brand? It was like, I'm going because I love to laugh and it's so fun to be a part of these shows and just to be in this community. And then after doing that for a while, I found like, one, I have no free time. As a teacher, my days were so scheduled, it was so stressful, and I was still doing this. Like I was sacrificing the few hours of sleep that I would get to be at the comedy theater. And so I realized there's something there, right? Like I'm clearly making time for this thing, even though it doesn't make any sense to make time for it. And maybe I should pay attention to that. And also, after doing it for a few years, I realized that people were coming to see me. Not a lot of people, but there were enough people coming and people were coming back to shows. And when I invited friends, they didn't just come once. They were being supportive, but then they'd come back of their own volition. It made me think maybe this could be a thing. And the nice part about being a teacher is, as far as trying something, it wasn't like I was making that much money in the first place. And there was this natural cycle to a year where when I asked my principal, it looks like maybe I could make this work with just comedy, but if it doesn't work, can I come back? And they said, we hire new teachers every September. So if it doesn't work out, no promises, but almost certainly we'll be able to hire you back. So I looked at the numbers and I figured like between the little bit of money that I'm making right now, and even if I get literally any part-time job, I'll be able to make ends meet. And at the end of a year, if it seems like it didn't work, then I'll just know. Because that was the only thing holding me back from loving teaching. I really enjoyed it so much, but I just always wondered, what about the comedy thing? So I figured I'd take a year, and then it worked. So I got lucky a few times in that first year, and as a result, it just kept on going from there.
Congratulations.
What was the theater that got you started?
It was called Improv Boston ironically in Cambridge, Massachusetts, not in Boston.
Yeah.
It was an improv theater that also had sketch and stand up. But I performed. One of the great parts about starting in a city like Boston is it has a great tradition of comedy, but it also has a relatively low bar to entry, right? It's not like Chicago or New York or LA where there's a lot of famous people performing too. In Boston, it was like after you had performed for a while and had built up a set, you could achieve the goal of getting to perform at all of the theaters around Boston. And that was my goal. And it was like it was relatively possible. Whereas nobody soon in their comedy career gets to perform at all of the theaters in LA or Chicago or New York. That just doesn't really happen unless you're already a famous person.
And if you can make it in Boston, then you don't have sticker shock when you move to Los Angeles.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really genuinely, I think for people who are starting out, the best thing you can do is to start in a small or medium-sized city, because you can build your voice, you can be part of the community. And then when you go somewhere else, like you said, you're slowly dipping your toe in the hot water of how much things cost, but also you just have a support system and a network. And also you've slowly built your material, whatever that is, even if it's improv, you've built the chops to be able to do it.
And do you think there's a difference in culture between Boston and LA in
Oh,
terms
certainly.
of your comedy had to shift a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think there's a difference in culture in every city that you perform in. I think one of the really fun things about being a comedian is, and you two know this, right? Comedy is this, it's such a beautiful art form because it requires the audience to be in on it.
Yes.
So I've said this a bunch of times in interviews because I think it's so brilliant. But one of my good friends, this amazing stand-up comedian, Mike Kaplan, he has a joke where I'm butchering it, but essentially he says, you, the audience, he says this to the audience, you decide whether what I'm saying right now is a joke. If you laugh, it's a joke. If you don't laugh, it's a poem. And that's so true, right? Like, there's no art form where if you paint something, you don't hand it to the museum and they go, this isn't a painting. This is a plate. You go, no, it's a painting. It is, whether you like it or not. As a result of that, and there's this really short feedback loop where you say it and it is immediate in the moment. It's not like a movie or a sketch or something where it comes out weeks or years later. You get this temperature check on the room and the place that you're in. I've had the opportunity a few times to tour around the country, either doing my own shows or opening for people. And you always, every city, every town, every place, you learn that different things are funny to different people and to different groups of people on different nights. I've performed I performed in the Panhandle of Florida, and the same joke would get a laugh in a different place. A different word would be funny in the punchline than it was when I performed it in Vermont. And I think that's the kind of stuff that for most comedians, this is where we really like nerd out and you can go so deep down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out exactly what it is about that particular wording that makes it work well here and less well there. And how can you make it so it's a little bit more universal or take the lesson of that?
So we're with the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. How do you find humor and comedy to be therapeutic?
I think there's so many ways. I'll tell you a couple things. So one of the big projects that I do is I host a show called Wrong Answers Only, where three comedians try and interview a scientist about their work. And they laugh and the audience laughs, they learn, they come away with that. And I can talk a lot more about like why I think that's such a fun project that I've done for so many years. But I think there's this therapeutic piece of it, which is that humor lets you pay attention to things in a new way. And it opens you up to examining things from a different perspective. So I think that alone is therapeutic. I think when you think about mental health, being open to the idea that there are other perspectives out there, that alone is the goal of a lot of therapy. A lot of talk therapy is just trying to get you to the place of this one way of thinking isn't the only way. And then as far as the other reasons why humor can be therapeutic, I know that for me, I've already talked about how humor has been such a big factor in building community, in connecting with people, in making friends, in feeling like I could talk to people, in diffusing tension. And all of those have really clear, established health benefits for your physical health as well as for your emotional and mental health. And I was telling you a little bit before we started recording, but I'm writing this book right now called Humor Me that's coming out in January 2026. And it's about the way that you can see the world like a comedian. So not performing, but just like seeing the things in the world and finding what's funny in your everyday life and laughing more. And I interviewed Roberta Gold, another person from the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor in that book. And we talked about how she, when dealing with her own medical issues or her family's medical issues, had found that humor could really make difficult procedures go by faster. It could make her feel better. It could lower her stress levels. And I think sometimes we think about that as less important than, for example, like an antibiotic. And in some ways, it definitely is, right? Like humor is not the best medicine. The best medicine is probably penicillin. But the reason why laughter is medicine too is because if you can distract yourself, if you can lower your tension, you can lower your stress, you can lower your perception of pain, it means that you might not need as much of the pain medication. It means that you might not need the anti-anxiety drug to the same level, especially in these acute settings. And then that means that then you don't have the side effects from that. There's a lot more that I could say about it. I literally could write a whole book about it.
Love it. Sounds like you did.
Yeah, almost. It's almost done. By the time this podcast comes out, hopefully the book will be like sent back into the publisher.
Oh, and it's important that I add this disclaimer. If you're still laughing 4 hours after this podcast is over, see a doctor immediately.
Tell us about problem areas. Like we noticed that you had an episode called Space Problems, Merde Problems, I'll say it in French,
Uh-huh.
and Minnesota Problems.
Yeah. So this was a show hosted by Wyatt Cenac, formerly of The Daily Show. A lot of people also know him from the sitcom People of Earth. And the idea was essentially, it was executive produced by John Oliver. And the idea was essentially, in some ways, like where Last Week Tonight looks at big issues and uses comedy to get people to understand them and to think about them. What if you did that same thing, but for the field? So you went out and actually saw the things in the world. And it was focused on communities and how communities were trying to solve problems. So it was a comedy show that was focused on solutions to big issues. So the first season, we looked at policing in America. And the second season, we looked at education in America. And the idea was these are things that a lot of smart people have come up with ideas and have perspectives on. So what if we just used comedy to get people to pay attention to these ideas and solutions and communities that normally are not getting a lot of press? Because the stuff that gets press is the dramatic, the disasters, the controversial stuff, the stuff that feels very like politically divisive. But then when people are actually doing the small everyday work that makes a big difference, that stuff often just gets overlooked or minimized, and you can get people to pay attention to it with comedy. I thought it was a really cool idea for a show, and I think Wyatt is so talented at it. As you can imagine, right? It's like it's a little harder to explain that in a commercial, to be like, one, here's what solutions journalism is. Two, it's funny. Three, here are some big issues. Four, it's a lot easier to just be like, it's about a cow that talks. Like that show is a much simpler commercial when talking cow. And you know what? That doesn't exist. I'm copywriting that right now. I'm going to make the Talking Cow show. But so we worked on that. I worked on that for 2 seasons. And I think where it might align with the world that you two come from and that I really feel a lot of draw to as well is the idea that there's nothing wrong with comedy for comedy's sake. There's nothing wrong with just like getting people to laugh. I love that. For me personally, most of my career, I've been a lot more interested in how do you get people to actually genuinely laugh, but then use that to get them to take away something else. So when I'm doing it with a scientist on Wrong Answers Only, it's like, how do you make the people really laugh and then go home and say, actually, I just learned something I would have never heard before about structural engineering. Like I would have never gone to a lecture on structural engineering. And it was a comedy show. I laughed a lot, but now I know something different. And the point of Problem Areas was how do you go home with people thinking a little bit differently about like these issues that people often feel hopeless about, that things just are the way they are.
Yeah. Can you tell me how the Maird problems, because we have someone who worked with Maird problems right over there.
Jim Bob, you were a sewage man.
That's right. Sanitary engineer for 35 years. So.
Wow. Okay. So this was in every episode, we would have a small kind of like animated pitch for a solution. And this was a company that had figured out how to power school buses by using fuel that was exclusively made from animal manure and human manure, shall we say, Maird, as you want to say. So this was basically driving around in the bus that you don't want to smell the exhaust on this bus, basically.
That's not French fries.
That's not French fries, but an incredible idea that you solve 2 problems at once, right? You solve some of the greenhouse gases and pollution, and you also solve what do you do with all the waste. It was a cool idea. I don't think that this company is, I don't think they're the next hot startup, but it is a cool. Jim, tell me what was your experience in this world?
My experience in this world was that I was drawn to it in part because poop is funny.
Absolutely.
I've always liked, I too have always liked comedy. Again, never the class clown, always class clown adjacent. Love the act of creating it and some of that. So when I got to be an engineer, I gravitated towards it because one person gave me the piece of advice. He said, when you go into engineering, he says, there are only 2 industries which you're always going to be guaranteed employment. One is the food industry because people have to have food. And the other is the waste industry because there's always going to be waste. And it turned out to be right. And when you started talking about waste in a humorous manner, it got people's attention. And you can say, there's a problem. What are we going to do with this incredibly toxic, smelly, whatever problem? If you can present your ideas in a humorous manner and say, okay, we're solving a problem here and we're going to have fun solving the problem, it was easy to get people on board and sell ideas.
So yeah, I love that. That's so fun. Also, I do find, I don't know if you found this, but I do find that there is kind of like a hard split in comedy where half the people think that poop jokes are really funny and the other half are like, that is not comedy for me. They're just
Right.
repulsed. And I've always thought it's hilarious. But I do find that if I write in my newsletter about a poop heavy story, I'm like, at the top, I have to say, this is for bathroom humor people. If you're not a bathroom humor person, please come back next week. I guarantee you, you'll find something there. I imagine those people are gone from your life decades ago now at this point, though, Jim Bob.
Yeah, I did learn a lesson though when I first taught improv to elementary school kids. Okay, is that the first time you mention poop, every offer after that is poop.
Absolutely.
You can't look at.
Yeah, you definitely, as soon as you've introduced that possibility, it's hard to go. This is partly why a lot of times stand-up comedians want their openers to be clean, is because when you go dirty, then people are like, you gotta stay dirty. I don't want to go back clean. I gotta hear the rest of the filth now. Katie, where are you on the bathroom humor, non-bathroom humor scale?
I'm good with it. I was a diplomat clown in DC, so I literally was the clown. And I have a face painter friend. We used to hire each other, and she was very open with her poop ability.
Not
And
what you
so,
want from the person touching your face.
oh nope, this was usually off the clock.
Okay, good.
She would tell me the latest joke that she heard or whatever, and it was a little bit surprising, but I'm open. I can handle it. My uncles were doctors. So,
Okay. I do feel like medical families are almost always very open about this. Yeah.
Yes.
But you were dealing with a whole other kind of BS. You were dealing with the verbal kind rather than the real kind.
I was in DC, so I was performing for everybody's consulate and embassy. And so that was very interesting. When I moved to DC, I said, I'm in I don't want to make anybody angry, but to myself, I said, I think I'm in the lyingest place in the world. And
I
I went,
the people you make angry are from a different town. They're like, how dare you say that? Sarasota is the lyingest place on earth. How dare you say that? We Sarasotans have never told the truth once. I'm so sorry, Sarasota.
No,
that was a hypothetical example.
All right. Yeah. No diss here to anybody, but I made the best of it. I traveled the world in 5 states, and I really actually enjoyed it.
I would also, it feels like a clown who is also stealing state secrets, a spy clown is.
I used to be called, I have a character that was Spy Clown. I also had SWAT Spice.
Oh, wow. SWAT Spice is really good.
That was in LA, actually.
That feels great.
SWAT Spice showed up in LA. But yeah, I made it
notoriously, a lot of our police are the SWAT Spice.
Right, nowadays.
They go to the SWAT Spice a lot sooner than other cities.
Exactly. But I got on the front page of the Hollywood Reporter by stilt walking up and down Hollywood Boulevard with a sign that said superhero for hire.
Incredible. Absolutely. I love that.
I was proud.
That you should be proud. I'm proud of you just hearing that story.
So I'm very curious. We are at a very pivotal time, and I want to see what we get to do with this. On November 25th, you had Monica Guzman on your podcast, and you were discussing about how to have curious conversations in dangerously divided times.
I will say my one disclaimer here is that the podcast How to Be a Better Human is not trying to be funny. Like almost no jokes, and that's totally fine. I think that I use my intellectual framework of comedy, right? Which is to say that piercing self-seriousness, being okay with being laughed at and looking like a fool and being a fool. That's what I use in the show. Because the show is basically like it's produced by TED, the TED Talk people. And the concept is, here are these people with these giant, amazing, brilliant ideas. What would a regular person do? It's so great that you're so smart, but what does a regular person do to actually put this into place? And I think that's a very comedian question, to be like, okay, great, but what about the rest of us?
Yeah.
I understand you're so smart. So that's my disclaimer. It's not like we were trying to make, I wasn't like finding the punchline in like dangerously divided times. What up?
Okay, gotcha.
But I think Monica Guzman is a really interesting person, and she runs this organization called Braver Angels, which is basically just really dedicated to the idea that we need to have actual conversations across divides, most famously the political divide in the United States, but across all divides. And they've built this framework for how you can have a discussion that isn't just saying talking points at each other, but is about finding the fact that we are both shared. We have a shared humanity. We have shared values. And I think it's interesting that at this moment in time, that it's in and of itself is it's countercultural, it's controversial, right? Like the idea that you can be a Democrat and you can talk to a Republican, or you can be a Republican and talk to a Democrat, and it can not be about finding what's wrong with the other person, but just starting with a connection. And I think Monica Guzman is a really interesting person, and she runs this organization called Braver Angels. She makes, to me, a very compelling case that there's no path forward for our country unless we actually can just talk to people who we disagree with, because increasingly it's hard to even talk to people you disagree with on the same side, much less different sides.
That's right.
And I think, again, this is a place where humor plays a big role, especially self-deprecating humor, right? Because it's, you listen to my comedy, if you listen to my podcast, and you find out that I live in Los Angeles and I was born in New York, it's not hard for you to be like, this guy's probably a liberal. And guess what? I don't defy your expectations. But I think it's a lot easier to talk to people who disagree with me if I am willing to say, which I certainly am, I am also a complete buffoon and wrong about things all the time. So I don't think I'm wrong about my deeply held political beliefs, but I also have been wrong. All you have to do is talk to my wife, and she will say that like 100% of the time that I go, listen, I am positive this couldn't happen. Then she's like, 10 minutes later, exactly what I just said happens. I'll be like, there is no way that the baby is awake. It is way too early for the baby to be awake. That must have been a noise from outside. We walk out. The baby has been awake for 20 minutes. There's never, I'm always wrong. And so I think being able to laugh at yourself is a really important, and it's a really important step for communication. I also just think it's a really important life skill, right? So much of the bad stuff that happens in the world, in my opinion, is people trying so hard to not be embarrassed or ashamed. And I think that a great part about being a comedian is when something happens that is a little embarrassing or shameful, you're like, it's probably going to be funny when we talk about this. It's okay if people laugh at it.
Question.
Please.
I'm part of a Braver Angels chapter in West Virginia.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. I have this dream someday of doing a Braver Angels workshop on humor for political consciousness there.
Yeah.
And again, that's the pipe dream. So if you could tell Monica that there's this crazy guy in West Virginia actually thinks it might make it work. And why do I think it might work? Because the most effective politicians ever always used humor to make a point.
I think that humor is a really important tool. And again, it's a tool that you can use both ways, right? Like bullies are also really good at humor, right? Bullies often make people laugh as they're really mean to people, but that doesn't mean that you can't also use it for good. Also, this is just an example of my level of buffoonery, right? Is here I am on this show and you're interviewing me and you're asking me questions, but then you all are so much better to answer the questions and you have like deep years of knowledge. And you're like, so Chris, how does humor play a role in politics? And then Jim Bob is, for 20 years, I've worked on humor in politics. I helped run a Braver Angels thing. And I'm like, one time I talked to a lady who was on Braver Angels.
Full disclosure, I do not run anything in Braver Angels.
I know, but I'm just saying way more than me. I'm a dude who I Googled the words Braver Angels one time. And now I'm like, I think I'm an expert. Hello. And Katie is, I've actually worked in conflict mediation in Washington, D.C. That's my career. I'm a clown who helps defuse the nuclear bomb. And I'm like, and actually, from a movie, I'm pretty sure you cut the red wire. That's the one to cut.
That's right. And I'll take it even further. This clown got shut down and started a nonprofit whose whole purpose is to be the clown mediator without looking at the sides of politics. So I give random people cards. I have to put it in front of me like this.
See. Thanks for being on Earth today.
Yes. And little joys and little lights and things. And then I give people random standing ovations in the middle of the grocery store and tell them that they are worthy simply because they exist. It doesn't matter what side you're on.
The other thing that I will just say about this, because I think this is something that I've increasingly become really convinced of, is even if, and I don't think this is necessarily the right, Monica certainly pushed back really hard when I talked about this with her, even if your goal was to convince someone else, we have this really skewed idea that is so inaccurate of how you convince someone else of something. It's if I find out that you believe something different than me and I give you my whole and this is why that's bad. 1, 2, 3, incredible point. Read this link. It is almost never does the person go, you know what? You're right. I'm wrong. I was wrong. Thank you for showing me the light. That's just not how people change their minds, right? Like the way people change their minds is slowly over time. They start to have a little seed of something else, but also it's like an emotional process. It's a part of their identity. So if you want to change someone's mind to make them more like you, you actually have to just build an emotional relationship with them. And the flip side of that is that if you build an emotional relationship with someone who believes things that are different than you have to also acknowledge that you may end up believing things that are different than what you believe right now in the end of it too. And so it's never just a one-way street. And that's not to say that people have really messed up ideas sometimes. People have really like horrible, dangerous ideas. Even with those people, the way to get them to change their mind, there's so much research, there's so much evidence. And also we have like hundreds of years of history to show us that you don't change their mind by being like a condescending know-it-all. That's just not how people change their minds.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You connect, that emotional connection, that connect on the human level first. And then
humor is such a perfect way of doing that. If you make someone else laugh, that at least in that sentence, you two are on the same page. Because if you're not, they don't laugh. But if you two are laughing, there was at least this minuscule connection. And that's the thing that you can build from.
Yes, agreed.
And also, anyone who has done comedy knows that it's true in all forms of comedy. Stand-up, I think, is the most like dramatic version of this. But if you get someone laughing at your first joke, it is so much easier from there. If they don't like your first two jokes, you are in such a hole. And it's certainly possible to dig your way out, but you have to do so much more work. If you start by connecting with humor, pretty much everything you say from there on out, you've got them you're all on the same page. You're all on the same team. And that's true in a conversation too.
I'm sorry.
Please.
It just brings me back to therapeutic. It becomes more therapeutic because now we're using it with a purpose to connect. And the relaxation side of it. Once we reduce the cortisol through laughter and raise the endorphins, now people are more relaxed and more bonded and more open to having any conversation.
I interviewed a therapist, Dr. Tracy Foos, who worked at UCSF in San Francisco for a long time. She helped run a program there. And she and I together, she hadn't really thought about the role of humor in her practice, although she had used it. And so in this interview, we together had this interesting conversation where she was thinking through the ways in which humor was helpful as a therapist. And she and I together hit on this idea that it was a way that you could introduce this thing called therapeutic ambiguity, right? Like the idea that maybe this thing isn't exactly the way that I think it is. So for me, like I have a lot of catastrophic thinking where like something bad happens and I go immediately like the next bad thing is going to get worse and it's worse and worse. And then it's just all downhill from here. And a joke, someone making some light fun of me or me laughing at myself can all of a sudden make me think, is it true that finding a hole in my sock means that I'm going to get fired and be a social pariah and no one will ever like me? That seems like I've maybe gone a little far from a single hole in my sock. And I give that as like a joking example. And yet it's not that far off from the spirals that I get myself into. And so the idea that you can break up some of that definitive thinking and have a therapeutic ambiguity, I think is a really cool way of thinking about humor. And I think it also hits on like the political certainty too, or the like self-centeredness or any piece of this, where if you get a little bit of laughter, people can go, maybe it's not 100%, maybe it's 99. And even that is progress.
You know who I feel sorry for?
Who?
I feel sorry for the fourth grade class that didn't get to experience you as their fifth grade teacher.
Don't worry, because while it was funny, I was really bad at giving feedback on their homework. So they probably got like much better academic instruction. They probably had a less laughter filled, but much better. They're probably much better at reading and math. And I guarantee you they could do long division in a way that none of the students who had me as a teacher can.
So tell us about some of your current projects that you're really excited about.
Yeah, the projects that I'm working on right now are in 2025. We have the fifth season of How to Be a Better Human coming out with Ted and PRX. I'm really excited that we're going to get to keep doing that. My book, like I said, I'm about to finish this book, which is going to be called Humor Me, all about how you can see the world like a comedian and laugh more in your everyday life and why that matters. That will be out in January 2026. So sometime in this year, people will be able to start pre-ordering it, which I'm really excited for. It's my first book. I've never done a big project like that. And then we are doing the show Wrong Answers Only, where comedians interview scientists. This panel of, which is so much fun for me because we get to have three amazing celebrity comedians, people who I've admired forever. It changes every time. People like Lauren Lapkus or Aparna Nancherla or Paul F. Tompkins or all sorts of people. They are on the show, and then we talk to scientists from all over the country and the world who do different things. And we're going to be doing that every other month in Los Angeles. But the cool part is that it also is streaming online. So you can watch it from wherever, anywhere in the world, for either free or very low price. So those are kind of things that I've got going on. And then I'm trying to do more other stuff to leave myself open. I think comedy relies on a little bit of serendipity and seeing some things in the world and noticing that. So when I think about maybe writing another TV script or trying to build a new touring hour of comedy, I'm trying to stay open to what that might be about, whether it's parenting or the world or a strange rabbit hole that I go down that I haven't yet discovered.
What kind of advice would you give for someone who is a burgeoning comedy writer?
For a burgeoning comedy writer specifically, I would say that the biggest things you can do are realize that like these jobs don't get posted on LinkedIn. Like they don't get posted. There's not like a website. You can't, in some ways, it seems like it actually should be like that. You should be able to go to cbs.com and see, oh, Colbert is hiring new writers, because at some point Colbert hires new writers, but that's not how they do it. They very rarely post it publicly. So the way that you get to even know that these jobs exist is by being a part of the community of other writers.
Mhm.
And the first part, the how do you even know they exist, feels so overwhelming and daunting. Like, how would you ever do that? I get that. But the second part, how do you become part of the community of writers, is actually the easiest and most fun part, which is that it's so different than being a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, right? You can't just wake up one day and be like, guess what? I am a waste management engineer, Jim Bob. Me too. That is not how it works. But you can wake up one day and say, I'm a comedy writer. And the only thing that someone could ever test you on is whether you have written comedy, right? Comedy. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. You're a comedy writer. As soon as you've done one day of writing for yourself, you're a comedy writer. And then the way that you build the community is put that out there. There's so many ways to put it out there online for free. The simplest is just put stuff out on social media, but you make sure that you have a website, post things on a newsletter, submit them to McSweeney's or the New Yorker or an online comedy journal that is at the university that is nearby you or that you go to, right? Like the only limit to you getting your work out there is your own fear and uncertainty and shame. So don't be intimidated if your work gets rejected by McSweeney's. That's okay. Put it out somewhere else. Put it out on your own website. And the way you get better isn't by having one perfect thing. It's by having 1,000 bad things. And each one is slightly better than the last. And then at the end of the 1,000, you're like, actually, I'm okay now. So that's the biggest thing. I think that people who are successful in comedy and in comedy writing, they just keep doing it and they keep putting it out there. And they build a community by sharing work with other people. And this is a big thing that people forget, telling other people when you like their work. There is no group of people more desperate for praise than comedians. And you would be shocked at how famous a person has to be before they don't want you to send them an email from their website or reach out to them on social media and just say, without asking for anything, I loved your video. I loved your tweet. I loved this piece that I read. Like, that's how you build a relationship, is to start by just having a genuine connection with them. So I know often when I tell young people this, or people trying to switch, they're frustrated. They're like, what I wanted you to tell me was like, there's a secret, there's like comedians.biz. And if you press the escape key, then it'll load the website. But it's not that.
That sounds so 90s.
Yeah, it really does. But it's just like there is no trick, right? The trick is everyone has their own path. You get out there and you do it and you treat other comedians well, and then they like you and you get to do more stuff with them.
Right. There is no try. There is only do. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And you don't do this alone. The people who are successful, it is because other people like their work and like working with them. That's how you get hired. Literally, I'll tell you it's always helpful to have a specific example rather than a generic one. The way that I got to do comedy as a full-time job. And again, there's no one path. Everyone has their own path. It's not like you can duplicate mine, but the lessons from mine, I think you can maybe take a little bit from, which is I was working as a teacher. I started performing at this theater. I made friends with all the people at the theater. It was great. I was making no money, but I was having a great time. Eventually, after I'd been there for a few years, they let me teach a class. Now I was making, I think, $100 a month. Okay, great. That's amazing. I'm making some money off comedy. I felt really great about that. I had this idea for a show, the show where comedians interview scientists. And I applied for like a local arts grant, like truly just from cold. And that let me buy like a recorder that I could record the audio on. So I could put it out as a podcast. And then that did pretty well. And so then that grew. And then I took that and I sent a cold email from there to the local public radio station and said, this feels like it could be a public radio show. Would you ever want to meet with me about it? And I met with them and they were like, actually, this does seem like it could be a public radio show. Maybe we'll you want to do a pilot with us? And they gave me a very small amount of money, but it was a huge amount of money to me because it was more than $100. I think they gave me $5,000 to do a pilot. And that included like renting the theater and paying all the people. So it ended up being like, I got like $800 for probably months of work, but it was huge. And then how I went from that one accomplishment, which involves so much luck and serendipity, but like anyone can have that first thing if you just like luck in comedy happens by you working hard to get better and just putting yourself out there in hundreds of ways. And the one you don't expect works. But from that moment, then I had a bunch of comedians who were on the panel and I would treat them well. I made sure that even when I was only paying them $10, because that was all that we had, I paid them and I said thank you afterwards and I treated them well. And then people liked being on the show. And then the way I got my first TV writing job was Josh Gondelman, great comedian, great writer. At the time, he was just starting in his career. He'd been on my show a few times. And so he'd seen me perform and knew that he liked me and saw the kind of thing I do. He got an email from someone because he had just started working at Last Week Tonight. And they said, we're trying to do a new late night comedy show that's going to be about science. Do you know anyone who could do that? And he sent them back like, Chris is the person. He does this already. But I would have never known that job existed. And I certainly would never have gotten hired and I'd never written for TV. I had no resume for it. But because Josh recommended me, they took me in for an interview. I was able to say, here's a few years worth of my work. So I had a body of work that I just made independently. And then they took a chance and they hired me. And that was my first TV job. And then the way I got my second TV job was people from the first TV job who liked working with me. So like my whole career changed by this thing that would have never happened if I hadn't just thought about it as I'm going to try my best to treat people well and do something that speaks to me. It wasn't because I like got passed at the biggest club in town or because I got cast on SNL. That happens for some people, but you don't need that to be successful.
To give me an idea for another show.
Please, you should do it.
We take doctoral candidates who are preparing for their oral exams and have them do their defense, but not in front of the people that do it. Have them do their defense in front of insult comics. If they can survive that, then they're ready to go.
Yeah, that's a true self-defense workshop. That is for sure. If you can survive that, you're definitely going to survive the panel of professors.
I have one more question. Do you think that humor has been specifically therapeutic for you in some certain way?
Yes, I think humor has been therapeutic for me in some certain way. The reason I paused is because I think that it cuts both ways. I think that I sometimes can use humor to deflect from talking about real issues and to deflect from real intimacy or vulnerability, right? It's certainly easy when you've built this muscle to deploy the muscle in ways that are unhelpful as well. This is a little aside, but I think this is really true, is I'm a straight guy and I'm really bad at sports. And in most places in the United States, if you're a straight man and you're not interested in sports and you're not good at sports, it's hard to make friends. You're a little bit of a social pariah. And one of the ways that you can avoid that, at least that I found, is if you're funny and you're around other funny people, still like you. Like that is a way to be. That's one of the like acceptable forms of straight masculinity in America that doesn't require hand-eye coordination. So in some ways, I'm like, I think that I avoided a lot of like emotional pain by not feeling like I was like a total outcast and bad person, not worthy of friendship when I was in elementary and middle school, because I had found this intellectual way. And then the other thing I think is a few years ago, I've talked about this and written about this, and she's talked about it too. So it's not, I feel okay saying it, but like my wife had a bunch of terrible injuries and was really having this like long recovery and really struggling mentally and physically. And she's better now, which is amazing. But while we were really in it, one of the things that I think helped us get through this really dark time was just trying to find something at the end of each day that we would laugh about. And a lot of times it was just like, let's watch. It was not like, I found this funny thing that I came up with. A lot of times it was like, let's just watch outtakes from The Office. And it will just be like, we'll watch this one clip that is really like, we've seen it a million times and it will just make us laugh a little bit. But that piercing of the seriousness of the moment and just having at least one moment that was like a little bit of a relief each day, that really helped us get through. I think that was a huge therapeutic tool for us. And I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't had that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that personal information too. And I think that's really great for our listeners too, to understand that they don't have to be comedians. They don't have to be the funny person in the room. If there's a struggle, you can go watch something funny or go to a funny show or look at something funny or listen to something funny, and you will get benefits from it. I think
Yeah.
that's great. Great example. Thank you.
I'll also just put a pitch in here, which is that I have nothing to do with this, but a thing that I found that when you're really struggling to find something to laugh at, whether it's just because the day is so brutal or because you're exhausted, we have just as humans, laughter is contagious. And there is a great subreddit on Reddit that's just called r/contagious laughter. And it's just people laughing really hard in ways that make you laugh when you watch them. And not every video does it for me, but a lot of these videos, you just watch someone start cracking up and they're laughing so hard and you just can't help but laugh too. And that is just biological. Like there's a biological piece of it where you can't help but laugh a little bit.
I
When you
love
find
that.
YouTube clips of babies laughing,
Oh, yes.
yeah, so
So I think that like that, I always want people to not discount that stuff, right? But also sometimes people
Yeah.
feel like it's weird to go to a comedy show alone or something like that. And I'll tell you that as a comedian, there's nothing we love more than when people come to see us alone or with other people. Like I never think it's weird if someone comes to one of my shows and they just bought a ticket for themselves. I think that's awesome. But that also takes a lot of energy. So sometimes you watch a social media clip of a baby laughing and that's enough. And other times you go out to see a comedy show and that's also great.
And sometimes you find Chris Duffy on YouTube and get to
Sometimes you
laugh at
find
his jokes.
Sometimes you go to the website chrisduffycomedy.com. That's CHRISDUFYCOMEDY.com. Sometimes you go to that website and then you click on calendar and yet I'm performing 3 times in the next year. So you better be living somewhere close to me or one of those places.
That's great. I guess that was going to be the next thing I was going to bring up, which is so perfect.
Yeah. Going on a national tour as long as you live in my neighborhood in Los Angeles.
there's a question that I usually ask, but I think that this is like Jeopardy because I think you've already answered the question. And so when I
Okay,
ask,
well, I'll answer it in the form of a question then for you.
okay, so good. On a typical crummy Thursday, okay, okay, how do you, what advice would you give somebody that's going through a hard Thursday, and how can they use humor on Thursday?
What is cry into a pint of ice cream, Jim Bob? No. I mean, look, that might work. I'm not going to say that doesn't work. Sometimes that works. I think one thing I'll say about humor is it's okay if sometimes it's bad, right? Like humor to me at its best is the opposite of toxic positivity, right? Toxic positivity is it's actually not a crummy Thursday. Every day that you're on this earth is beautiful and perfect, and you're so lucky that you experienced a Thursday at all. And I think humor is like, sometimes you have a crummy Thursday. Sometimes it is a garbage sewage plant Thursday. And I mean that not in the positive Jim Bob sewage plant connotation. It's the bad sewage plant Thursday. And you can laugh about how bad it is. And also sometimes you can't laugh in the moment. The most famous comedy formulation is tragedy plus time equals comedy. So sometimes you need more time before you can laugh. But I do think that the framework of seeing the world through the eyes of a comedian, and I don't mean by performing, but just seeing the world, the 3 things that I think are really crucial to that are being present in the moment. So seeing what's actually happening right now. And part of that is what you feel. It's not funny if someone pretends that they're feeling good when they actually feel crummy. It's much funnier if someone says, I am having the worst Thursday of my life. That is such a better starting place to find laughter than actually things are great right now. Things are so good. And you can tell it's not. So one is being present. Notice the things around you. Notice how you're feeling. Notice the small details. The second is be willing to laugh at yourself. Like I always do this. For example, for me, 100% of Februaries in my life, I have been like, I need to find a new career. I am bad at what I do. Everything in the world is bad. And I'm like, actually, it's just that it's been dark for 2 months. It's actually not. This has nothing to do with my career. It just has to do with the amount of sunlight that I've absorbed through my skin. That's what February is for me. Being willing to laugh at yourself. And then being willing to take a little bit of a social risk, right? Put yourself out there just a little bit. Let it be possible that someone will laugh at you because that's actually fun, right? Like laughter is a connection. And we think that we want people to see us as perfect. In fact, people like us more if they see your imperfection. So if you can do those 3 things, I think you're very likely to turn your Thursday in the future into less crummy because as comedy people, and not necessarily even just performers, therapeutic humor is that you think in any experience, it's either good because it's good or it's good because it's bad. And this will be a good story later on.
Yes.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. Thank
Wow.
you.
Yeah. Chris, I think we're going to come off of this and our chins are going to hit the floor and we're going to drool all over the place. And we're going to be so honored that you have spent this time with us. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you so much. And I am not liable for any medical injuries that are caused by your chin or drooling.
No,
So
you're
I
not.
will just say you signed a waiver ahead of time. You knew
We
what
did.
you're getting into.
We
No,
did,
seriously,
yeah.
this has been such a pleasure. I'm really a big fan of the association, and I think that what you do is really important. So thank you for having me. It's been a total pleasure.
This is amazing. I'm so glad that you were able to come and talk with us today. And you've given us a lot to chew on here. And can't wait to put in my order for Humor Me. That's going to be on my 2026 wish list. And I got looking forward to that. You have given a lot of ideas today. And first of all, I think one thing is when you write the pilot for Spy Clown, please consider having Katie cast as the lead, because I think
Oh, 100%. Yep. Katie, you're an executive producer on Spy Clown. No doubt about it.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you very much.
This has been Laughbox, the official podcast of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. We wish to thank our guest, Chris Duffy, former CEO of LinkedIn, current CEO of TED. And if you don't get that joke, you need to see his TED Talk on finding.
And Chris Duffy is not liable for anything said on this podcast whatsoever, or chins hitting the floor, or drooling.
Laughbox is a production of the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Visit us online at www.aath.org. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Music by Gary Rubio. For more information, www.garyrubiomusic.com.